welcome AMOS Conference Chair Darren Nishimoto.
All right, AMOS team, we're almost there, man. Hang in there. I'd like to introduce two people today. Colonel Jeremy Raley, commander of the Phillips Research Site and director of Space Vehicles Directorate, Air Force Research Lab, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. He leads a team of 1,080 military, civilian, and on-site contractors who comprise the nation's Center of Excellence for Military Space Science and Technology, Research and Development, as well as Advanced Technologies, Integration, and Demonstration. His organization focuses on enduring United States Space Force space missions, communications, position, navigation, and timing, missile warning, space domain awareness, and space control. Wow, impressive. I actually had the personal honor of working with Colonel Raley when he was the DARPA PM on Orbit Outlook and Hallmark, so I'm really excited to see all the successes he's going to have at the Research Lab RV. Colonel Raley received his commission in 1997 from the United States Air Force Academy. He started his career as a communications officer and transitioned into the development engineering career field after his graduate education. He has held a variety of positions in research and development as well as program management. Prior to his current position, Colonel Raley was a director of the Strategic Capabilities Group within the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, RCO, at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. While there, he oversaw space-based research, development, and acquisition activities for classified space acquisition programs assigned to the Space RCO and executed by the Strategic Capabilities Group. Please help me welcome Colonel Raley.
Thank you.
Second person I'd like to introduce is Mr. David Ehrlich, serves as the Principal Deputy for the Innovation and Prototyping Acquisition Delta, Space Systems Command, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. Mr. Ehrlich leads a combined team of 650 plus military and government civilians and contractors at 4 geographically separated units and manages a $1.1 billion portfolio to rapidly transition and deliver war-winning space concepts, technologies, and capabilities to the United States Space Force and mission partners across the national security space community. The Delta conducts and tests and experiments prototyping, demonstrations, and operations of innovative space systems and technology for the Space Systems Command. The Delta also executes the Space Test Program on behalf of the Department of Defense. Prior to his assignment, Mr. Ehrlich served as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force and was assigned as the director of the Department of Defense's Space Test Program Division, Advanced Systems and Development Directorate, Space and Missile Systems Center, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. The division's mission was to deliver advanced space solutions to collaborative space-based research and development and prototype demonstrations. Born in San Bernardino, California, Mr. Ehrlich was commissioned through the ROTC program in 1998 after graduating from the Northern Arizona University. His career spanned a range of operational acquisition and focused on acquiring a variety of space launch systems, developing communications and signal intelligence satellites, and serving on key staff positions that were responsible for developing, integrating, and evaluating, analyzing the U.S. Air Force's space security assets. Wow. Please help me welcome Mr. Ehrlich.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I have to admit, this is a much larger audience than I expected to see at this hour of the day. I had secretly hoped I'd be able to sit down on the edge of the stage and just be kind of, what do y'all 10 people want to talk about? But instead, we'll do what we rehearsed and yeah, just have it that way. So the title of this talk is Challenging Space, Strategic S&T from LEO to Cislunar. And that's a little bit of a misnomer. We're not really going to talk about specific orbits and those sorts of things. What we're really trying to communicate today is how the partnership between AFRL and Space Systems Command enables us to move what we're doing in research and development to the warfighter in a much more rapid manner and in a much more orderly manner than we've ever been able to do before. You've been here if you've been here in the past years, you've seen Colonel Felt and Colonel Roth stand up on this stage and do a similar thing. Part of that is our message that we are united. The Kirtland space ecosystem is extremely vital, and we are doing everything we can to make it stronger. The other part of that message is that, or the part of our message today is we actually have some examples of how our partnership is starting to pay dividends, and we're excited to report those things to you. I'll hand it over to Mr. Ehrlich.
All right, thanks, Colonel Raley. So just want to spend a couple minutes with you today kind of outlining exactly what it was Colonel Raley just kind of walked through. And what I want to do is step back a little bit to get everybody up to speed on what we're, what we're grounded in, but they're too far away. What we're grounded in and everything we do and the purpose that we do it in. A few years back, the senior leaders at the Air Force and now Space Force started to lay out the notion of what the space vision was and what our tranches were looking like that we had to go after. They were rooted into four main pillars as depicted here: evolve and enhance existing systems. If anybody's been paying attention to what General Gutlein and General Sheba and other senior leaders at SSC have been talking about recently, this is what we're talking about: exploit our existing capabilities, right? Space-based as well as ground and other notional systems that we're really looking to leverage what we have out there and really take full advantage of the systems that we have on orbit and operating on the ground to process data and enable our operators to deliver more impactful services to the warfighter. The second pillar, build resilient multi-layer architectures. That's pretty basic. What this means is that we need to start doing a better job fully integrating not only our organic Space Force and DoD assets, but start to enable and combine commercial, allied, and other sources of data into one meshed stream so that we have full cognizance of everything that's out there from all of our partners, not just a myopic view for what our sensors and data analytics can produce. Creating a multi-cloud domain. I think this is pretty basic, right? Is we need to progress into a domain that ensures there is no single point of failure, right? And the only way we can do that is through resiliency and through creating not only a land domain, airborne, but space, and then intermix the three so that they are compatible, interactive, and we can rely on all of them to eliminate that single source of failure. The fourth one is to pursue new missions enabled by space, right? So this is where we need to start thinking out of the box. We've always had our traditional pillars of excellence across the DoD and the IC, but now we need to look at those hybrid evolutions of cross-cutting technologies where we begin to partner and we pull from the best of the best, and we start to look at new ways to exploit and close the gaps that we've always had in existence. So that's the fourth one. But again, this is all underpinned by the notions General Gutlein's trying to get after, right? Is we need to exploit what we have, we need to buy what we can through commercial and partnerships, and only build when we have to, right? So that we can deliver capability to orbit, to console, to the warfighter quicker than we have in the past. So the Innovation and Prototyping Directorate, I'm proud to say I think this is the seventh name of the organization since I've been there. But so if I accidentally say Test Development Wing or AD or SD or any of those, just bear with me, I'm old. So this organization is built with a laser focus to deliver and mature capabilities from the S&T arena to a prototyped operational environment, providing an operational threat-based atmosphere to where we could actually test them. So we are that sandbox from soup to nuts where people can come in from Colonel Raley's shop or from other organizations across not only the DoD, but across the government, universities, and allied nations to get their technologies and their capabilities on orbit or into a system and see how it works. On the left here, the innovation development, we've started setting up several powerful tools and enabling capabilities that let us get after that. Number one is, most people are familiar with the spec construct of an OTA-based contract. So far, this has paid huge dividends in that we've already got 620 members signed up in the consortium. We've issued over, I think it's now 103 awards with $2.1 billion to non-traditional companies. And the goal there is to drive innovation from industry into the system through non-traditional means, right? We've tried to simplify the process through taking advantage of OTAs to where contracts and submissions to RFPs can be submitted with just a white paper, right? And so we've got the ceiling up to now, I think it's $13.4 billion, and we're looking to get after that. I think we've awarded to date, like I said, 2.1. But the goal here is not just to enable a contracting mechanism, but it's also to reach out to allied partners and nations and give them an easy and smooth ingress into the DoD and into the R&D technology. We've done that on numerous occasions. QZSS, we set up the partnership with them to start to field some SDA apertures before we started to turn it over to F. Schnell's folks. We have partnered with SAF-IA through the RELAR contract to start to develop and mature the ISAR process to where we are now launching, integrating, and getting data from allied nations. So we have a contract with 10 partner Five Eye countries and others to do just that. Enterprise enablers is we've taken it on across the enterprise to build flexible and resilient systems that prototypers, S&T agencies, R&D agencies can field their experiments in a R&D-like construct to validate them in a threat-resembled environment so that we can validate the technology and then be that enabler to propagate it onto operational systems. LDP and Rooster is just that, and we'll talk more about that later. Tetra that we've developed allows us to, we fielded now, I think we are on contract for 5. We field small ESPA-class satellites that are right angles only navigation capable, that we put a payload on top of it, and it can do whatever you want. And we'll leave it at that. But it is a key tenet to help us enable STARCOM's use of the National Space and Test Training Complex. So it helps us establish that range as well as deploy critical technologies to the warfighter. Near and dear to my heart, I think it's now the oldest running program with the exception of the B-52 modernization program, the DoD Space Test Program. I think, no, we're not even that old, but it was established back in the early 60s. But it allows us through DoD-I to field and experiment and operate burgeoning technologies in the S&T and R&D realm, providing access to space or high altitude experimentation for anybody in the government as long as they have a sponsor. So hugely successful, and they continue to break the boundaries on what is possible, driving TRL levels up and pushing technology quicker into the prototype and operational regime. And we've done that numerous things with Raley program, where we started to be the first ones to experiment with Vox for the launch enterprise. Started to do other burgeoning launch technologies. We're the experimenter. We can accept that risk. And then we're one of the only Well, we are the only ops center within the Space Systems Command. We have a fully functional ops center at Kirtland that can operate at the multi-domain security enclaves to validate and promote those technologies so that we can actually control them, test them, validate TTPs, and in some cases, operate them for the warfighters. So I think right now we've got about 10 operational systems flying on it, with about 3 more to come in as many months. And then finally, the newest addition is the true partnership Colonel Raley was talking about, SpaceWorks. So SpaceWorks was stood up a few years back as a spinoff from AFWorks, but it allows us to reach deeper into the industry and award SBIRS 1, SBIRS 2 to advance that new technology and get it to a point where we can roll it into the R&D systems that Colonel Raley is going to talk to you about. So right now, it's a huge tool that the Space Force has at its realm, but it's tempered, right, because of the partnership. It's key that Colonel Raley said, and as we used to say for those that served in Afghanistan, right, Shona B'Shona, shoulder to shoulder. There is no daylight between us, and it's through mechanisms like SpaceWorks that we ensure the technologies that flow into programs of record are done in a unified manner. So right now, I think SpaceWorks hugely successful. Annual budget approximately $300 million to award to small industries, non-primes, to get those technologies off the ground. So for those of you in the audience and listening online, please pay attention when those guys speak, because they are a huge advocate to getting your technologies into the system. Sir.
So I'm going to go into some of the challenges that we're tackling as Air Force Research Lab, and then draw that string through to why our partnership with SSC, especially SCI down there at Kirtland, is extremely important. First of all, command and control challenges. There's a number of reasons that command and control is important. As a government, I think that we have learned we will never stop buying command and control, because we're never going to stop evolving our systems. The threat is never going to stop changing, and we operate in a dynamic environment, and we want to do new missions within that. So we're never going to stop buying command and control. So coming up with a way that we can constantly evolve that, and that we don't end up in an intellectual exercise where we at AFRL have talked ourselves into believing this is the command and control way forward, are critical things to us. And the way we do that is by going over to the RSC and saying, can we fly this? Did we run into technical hurdles? Did we run into hurdles with personnel understanding what they're supposed to be doing? And the most important question, did we make the operator more effective by what we've done with our command and control? And so, you see a lot of words there on the left of that chart, but and talking about new opportunities and new missions, but what it boils down to is how can we, whatever the challenge is, whatever the new mission is, whatever the new technology available is, how can we leverage that to be an effective force? And command and control is that glue in the middle that allows that to happen. The next piece of that, or one of the supporting pieces of that, almost the hardware layer of command and control, you might say, are the communications links. And so we at the lab have a variety of programs where we're looking to make sure that we can link things together. It's what a lot of the air domain folks call the lightning bolts, where everybody draws, lightning bolts between things that are just supposed to happen as if by magic. And so, at the lab, if we're doing good enough science, it should appear magical to, especially to people who fly planes. So I can say that now because I'm in the Space Force, so. All right, good, you are still awake, good, okay. So, sorry, don't put me on Friday again. So our communications links are what allow that to happen. And you see a lot of things on there that we're getting after. The keys to those are flexibility and having a variety of paths whereby a message can be passed. If you want something to be resilient, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the sun's going to do. You don't know what your adversaries are going to do. And so having a variety of paths in order to be resilient and taking advantage of a number of phenomenologies is the way to get after that. And that's the way that we're proving. And again, because we have this partnership with Space Systems Command down at Kirtland, we're actually able to get a number of things up and flying. And we're able to do things on an ops floor that you wouldn't normally do, like say, hey, there's more than one way to communicate with this satellite. Right now, we're kind of in that paradigm. And over to the right of the chart, you see that PNT is referenced. That is just a special case of COM. And so that's easier said than done at this point. We all know that to be true, but implementing that and saying, okay, what are our other sources of position, navigation, and timing based on the fact that it's just a special radio signal. In fact, it's not even a special radio signal, it's a special processing of a radio signal. So going forward, and so moving from there, we talked about the kind of the hardware layer of, and that signal layer, the physical link that we're talking about with respect to communications. Now we're also looking to come up with a new network paradigm. And so the reason you see this with a long arrow in the middle is because this is something we have to evolve to. We can't just, snap our fingers and go, oh, yeah, we wish we had designed the space network different, so it's going to be different tomorrow because we changed what we drew on a piece of paper. There's a lot of things that have to be replaced. There has to be steps in between that allow backward compatibility so that we can continue to operate the way that we have. And so what you see is going from a centralized model where a bunch of satellites talk to a ground entry point and you go do that, to a more decentralized model where it's like, hey, doesn't matter what ground entry point I talk to a completely distributed path agnostic space and communications or space and ground communications architecture. And really where we want to get to in that is to a state of resiliency where talking to a satellite is less like a 1920 switchboard where I go, a signal needs to flow from here to here, and therefore I'm patching it together. And we do the patches virtually, so that's neat. But to something that's more like a text message, where when I hit send, you cannot imagine how much I don't care which tower that bounces off of and which tower it bounces off of on the other end. But there are a few provisos to that, right? When I send a text message, sometimes I get confirmation. Sometimes I get a message back from the recipient of that text message, and then I know my message got through, and I can continue to proceed like that. Sometimes I get worried because it's late at night and one of my children isn't answering my text messages, and so therefore things get followed up with more intensive communication protocols. So just realized how that sounds. I'm just talking about a phone call and then showing up in person, but to where they're supposed to be, and then phone calls to their friends. So, but all these have analogies in the space world, right? If I don't get an acknowledgement of a signal, well, there's a number of things I can do. I can go, not that worried about it. Let's give it some time, see if it works itself out. I can say, hey, I need an observation of this thing to see if it's obviously in distress, if it's tumbling or something like that, then what's going on there. And so moving our communications to that kind of network and having a place to prototype those, stress them out a little bit as we do in the RSC is great. And then one of the ultimate ends to that is autonomy. And so that means they're up there operating on their own. We don't have to be in communication with them for them to do their mission. We can suffer much larger latencies. So things that are out in cislunar space and in a place that's difficult to communicate with them, autonomy certainly applies, and that's one of our key things going forward. And that's why there is a partnership between Tracker Prime and Tetra 5. Those are actually the same program. One of my first acts in the seat at RB was to sign a memorandum of agreement with Colonel Roth that that's what we're doing as a joint force down there. And then the last thing is cloud virtualization. And this just comes down to, we've been talking a lot about how you talk to the satellites. How do the people operate in that environment? And that comes down to, I need I need the people to be able to operate wherever they are. Imagine just today if we had a control center on the East Coast. What would we have had to do? We would have had to go to our COOP site because of the impending hurricane, right? So if that COOP site is wherever I can pick up those people and put them in front of a JWICS terminal or even a NIPR terminal for some of our stuff, then that's better. And so moving the cloud into the RSC, starting to learn how, what the drawbacks are to that, because I do not take the panacea pill that like, hey, just rub some cloud on it and everything's going to be okay. And so being able to operate, again, with real people doing it is vital to us. And with that, we'll talk about prototyping.
Wow, it's hard. Colonel Raley is funny. So again, not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one. This is just to kind of back us into the conversation here. We all should know this. As we start to develop what those architectures and the gaps we are going after to fill, those are continually informed through experiments and novel concepts coming from the labs, specifically AFRL. They're coming from new things, as we'll discuss with the front door feeding into that, as to what technologies you guys are telling us are out there that we need to explore. And then that gets blended into the SWAC, where they start to define the process and what we need to get after.
Yeah, and so just a comment on that SWAC piece. We're standing up something called the Rapid Lab, whose main goal, and that's a very close collaboration between Air Force Research Lab and Space Warfighting Analysis Center, where we are going to work together to figure out what a correct force design is, and then from that we can figure out what experiments we need to do based on what capabilities we wish we had to close that, and where we have models with sensitive assumptions where like, oh, if that's not true, that would be really bad for us, and therefore we need to go fly an experiment and anchor that model.
Yep. And then the next box kind of in the legend here, is that is exactly what IMP does. We help design, verify, and then prototype, and then hand off to transition to a partner at a program of record. So my daughter drew this. No, actually it was MJ, she's in the front row. So this just kind of, stand up MJ. No, so this just kind of outlines to you some of the things we did and how the interactions with AFRL and SSC are actually producing results. And this is a tangible one. For example here, I don't know, the seeds of life, right? So for example, the BRE 440 project, right? That is a computer processing technique and chip and algorithm that gets after some quantum computing issues that then fed into the successful operation of the onboard flight computer for Eagle Mycroft, which then spawned several programs that have gone to operations, prototype, and R&D. LDPE Rooster, Tetra, NTS-3, ADOX, and others, and a lot that we can't talk about. But that close relationship enabled that. Ad nauseam SSC front door, right, this is a new concept General Gutlein has directed that we're getting after making it easier for industry and customers to approach SSC and understand how to do business with the DoD, specifically SSC. And it feeds into three things: the Space Enterprise Consortium, Commercial Services, and SpaceWorks before it gets in. Real quick, because I know we're running out of time, and I heard they've got more donuts. This is an example of one of the technologies that fed through that. It went through AFRL's Hyperspace Challenge. We call it Space Cancer because this is a company called RS-21 that took an oncology experiment and program that they have to identify and detect cancer in patients and said, why can't I do that on a spacecraft? AFRL picked that up. They took it through a few programs that we each volunteered a spacecraft to practice with, and they actually showed with a 98% accuracy method that they could detect anomalies that are going to happen to the vehicle before we did. And it showed on systems that had failed on orbit that they could have given us a 36-hour warning that a critical system was going to fail, that operators couldn't detect because it combined telemetry packets in a manner at which it tells you how the spacecraft operates. We can't pick that up from just looking at individual streams of telemetry, and we currently don't have anything out there. And they said, we've got an AI machine learning program that can do it. And so now we're putting this into our RSC to start operating on systems such as LDPE, Rooster, Tetra, and others, to see if they can help us learn how to operate better so we can have less people on the floor, reduce the manpower constraints, and protect our assets in a way we've never been able to before. So in summary, I'm not getting the red light yet, so maybe 5 seconds. But the message here, I think Colonel Raley and I want to get across, is AFRL and SSC are now working in unison more so than ever before, right? No longer will it be AFRL and what was SMC, and we work on the same technologies till one of them fails, right? We're gonna work together. We've now proved to the community that we can do it, right? We're delivering, and we've got to keep doing that if we're going to hit the goals that our leadership has defined for us. So,
Yep.
All right, and I think with that, I think we're out of time, but I want to thank everybody. This is exactly like living in Albuquerque coming here, so, except for everything you see out your window. Other than that, it's identical to Albuquerque, but with that, I think we have a few minutes for questions.
All right, so just as a reminder, feel free to ask questions, log in and go ahead and post them. But this question is directed to Colonel Raley in terms of the force design. So, sir, how do you envision industry contributing to the force design 5, 10, several years in the future?
So I envision industry contributing to the force design right now. The force design has to be constrained by the art of the possible. The force design for 5 to 10 years in the future has to be informed by the art of the, well, that's also the possible, but the more risky possible. And so as I've talked to some of our industry partners just while I've been here, we've talked about what they're doing now, what is kind of solved science, and the things that are gonna inform the force design of this FIDEP. And we've talked about areas of research where they're looking to solve hard problems. And some of you guys have asked me, what are your hard problems? And I've talked about the multi-domain, multi-directorate integration that we need to do in AFRL in order to bring end-to-end solutions to the warfighter. And those are the things that are going to inform the future force design.
Okay, question for Mr. Ehrlich.
Okay.
So with respect to working with STP, how do commercial vendors or commercial folks actually get any of their experiments? What is the nature by which they would go about getting that onto an STP mission?
So it's actually pretty easy, but there's one thing you have to remember, right, is any technology vendor, company, or government agency can go through the DoD space test program to get on orbit, but you need to make sure you have a government sponsor. And because what that government sponsor is charged to do is making sure that that technology gets after closing one of those architectural gaps. Because we can no longer afford to spend $100, $200 million launching experiments just because. And so what they're going to need to ensure is that you're actually going after one of those target architectural gaps or technology gaps that we currently have with either the command or AFRL or the NRL or SMDC, the NRO or NASA, which is who's all members of that. And then all they have to do is say, hey, I like Joe Bob's experiment and I think it fits into my architecture. And so I would just urge people, if you have something like that, work with one of your mission partners, PMOs that you know, and they can get you into the DoD CERB process, and it can go up to the board for consideration and launch and operations.
So as a follow-up, what is the best way, other than conferences such as this one, what are the best ways for industry to find out what those gaps are?
CNN?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the answer is communication.
Yep.
You said things like this conference. The value of this conference for me has been the massive, massive amount of communication that I've been able to do and the immediate follow-up that our industry partners are able to do because a lot of you in industry know the landscape, you know who else to talk to and who to collaborate with to solve things. And so communicate. get with us and talk about that. For us to sit down and make a massive list of our gaps would not only be hard and also obsolete by the time we finished it and static, it would be a security risk. So that's just, it's not going to happen. We're not going to come up with a list of work on one of these things and you're going to get money from the government. And so it's going to be about communication with us, and part of the value that we have in our more integrated partnership is that sometimes I know, sometimes an industry person will talk to me and I'm like, I can see why you think I would care about that, but actually, I do care about it, but Dave cares about it with money, so go talk to him. And those are the types of things that the services will perform for you.
And then I just had a flashback to my daughter calling me for college, asking for money. But to build on that a little bit, that is exactly the reason General Gutlein directed the stand-up of the front door, right? So I think the email address is sscfrontdoor@spaceforce.mil. Is if you have a question about the value of your technology, your idea, your thought, that organization will direct you to the point of contact you need to talk to, and they can validate for you if you're on the right track, and the office for where they're going to ask the questions. Yep. So, and with that, I guess a big white sign that said "Time's up."
Yeah.
So thank you again, everybody, for the time, and enjoy the conference.
Yeah. Thank you.